Now, it's been a year since Tim Wilson was appointed as a Human Rights Commissioner, and today he delivers a key speech to the National Press Club looking back on those 12 months. And he joins us in the studio. Tim Wilson, good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Virginia.
So it's been a year now at the Human Rights Commission. How would you characterise that year for you?
Incredibly constructive. Spent a year going around and consulting with people across the country about the human rights issues that affect them in Australia. And what I'll be outlining in my Press Club speech today is really some of the really important key themes about human rights, but also the freedom to exercise them and why that's so important in Australia in 2015.
Your headline of your speech is beyond human rights and towards freedoms, if I'm
exercising
freedoms.
Yes.
Why move beyond human rights?
Well, because it's not enough to just have human rights. It's not enough to just say, well, I have the right to freedom of speech. You have to have the freedom to then go on and exercise it. It's the same in lots of areas of rights. Property rights is a really good example where people might be able to own a bit of land, take Aboriginal Australia owning native title, but do they have the freedom to be able to exercise it, to create their own opportunities, build housing and build sustainable futures for themselves? And some of these themes are the things that I've been addressing rather than just focusing on whether or not somebody's got a legal right to it or not.
You went in as a commissioner for free speech. This was a key part of what you wanted to do and clearly what you're addressing today. Yet a key project of yours, the scrapping of Section 18C of the Race Discrimination Act, was abandoned by the government. Has that been a lost year then for you in that respect? Well,
what we have to start with is saying is identifying that I was appointed to be Australia's Human Rights Commissioner. There is only one Human Rights Commissioner. There are commissioners for other different issues, but I'm Australia's Human Rights Commissioner. Freedom of speech, yes, was a very important part of my work. We held a major national symposium in August of last year. And what that entire debate around Section 18C, the Racial Discrimination Act, identified is how much there has to be a good case for change being built. And you'll hear some of that issues being discussed today in my speech, as well as many other issues where you have to bring parties together to have a constructive dialogue before you seek reform. The government went about trying to propose a change without that constructive dialogue, and that's why we end up in the situation we are.
My question went to whether you experienced it as a lost year of possibility and achievement in that respect.
Absolutely not, because while that was all going on and while we were debating national security legislation, all those other things that I contributed to, I was running two parallel consultations throughout the country, one on human rights and freedoms and identifying where those issues were. The other one was in the area of the legal and regulatory problems that exist for people on the basis of their sexual orientation, gender identity and intersex status. And while I've been running those consultations, been developing a work program for the remainder of my 4 years. So the complete opposite. It was an incredibly constructive year and we got a lot done. When I first arrived at the Commission, the staff consistently told me it takes you a year to develop a full program, and that's exactly what we've been doing. And now I'm going to be announcing what I'm implementing.
Has the Commissioner, Gillian Triggs, been unfairly attacked in releasing the Children in Detention report?
Well, all my Commission colleagues, all the Commissioners, including myself, are not going to get involved in the politics of this report. Our interest is focusing on the children and the policy dimensions of this report. And it's quite clear to me that yes, it's a good idea to have stopped the boats and to also have made sure the deaths at sea ended. On top of that, it's good to be now seeing the government getting children out of detention. Our focus, as it should be, is to make sure that this never happens to children again. And I think if we got that full follow through from the government, that would make Australians proud.
So you stand by the report that Gillian Triggs released?
Well, I participated in the report.
I know you did. Do you stand by it?
I participated. This is exactly the point. I went and conducted interviews in Darwin and the detention centres, speaking directly to families and children about the human consequences of being locked up in detention for long periods of time. The conclusions of the report are obvious. It has an impact on their mental health if they're denied education. It has a developmental and socialising impact. This is not in dispute. This is why it's good to see what the government has done, let us see the full follow-through, and make sure we change a policy that existed for 23 years so no child is left in detention for long periods again.
So you don't have a problem with the government's policy of offshore processing?
Well, that's a political decision. I consider that outside of my realm. The reality is...
No, I'm not asking you I'm not asking you a political question. As Human Rights Commissioner, and the Human Rights Commission consistently turns its attention to the issue of mandatory detention and offshore processing, and indeed has done so recently. You actually support it. You don't have a problem with the government doing that.
No, there's a political decision that is being made about the extent to which people are allowed to arrive by boat and then seek asylum in Australia versus being done in a different country. I consider that outside of my portfolio responsibilities.
Why is that?
Well, firstly, when I arrived at the Commission, the President and I divided our responsibilities, and she took asylum seekers and international issues. I took domestic issues. So I'm respecting her contribution to that discussion, and if you want to ask her comment, you're most welcome to do so. My interest as part of the issue around asylum seekers in particular is to make sure that children are not in detention for long periods of time, and that hopefully never happens again.
Gillian Triggs has been subject to an extraordinary attack and reportedly has been asked to step down and was subject to scathing criticism by the Prime Minister in Parliament House. I'd like to offer you an opportunity this morning to back her if you'd like to.
Well, I have consistently said, and all my Commission colleagues have taken exactly the same attitude, is we are not going to get involved in the politics of this report.
We are interested in the question, Tim Wilson.
Well,
I'm simply asking if you would like to back your boss this morning.
Well, firstly, we need to clarify I'm an independent statutory officer. And what I'm going to do is back the report very clearly and support it and support the conclusions, and I hope to see them implemented. We are not going to fuel the political discussion around this. It is about the policy issues, and that's where the focus should be, on the children. The focus of the Human Rights Commission is not on itself. It is on delivering better outcomes for the Australian people.
So if there are still children in detention, say in 6 months' time, will you see that as a policy failure by the federal government?
Well, I don't think we're going to see that. We've very clearly seen over the remainder of the end of last year and the start of this year, the government is reducing the numbers. In fact, I think there was discussion on Q&A on Monday night where directly the issue was raised, and the number of children continues to decline on a day-to-day basis. If there is not the case, we will continue to raise the issue to make sure that children aren't in detention, and the government has indicated that's the case. They've given a deadline around Easter, and we're expecting them to meet that.
Turning to, I guess, you handling the job that you have now and the criticism that comes with it from time to time, personally, how have you managed that? I've been noticing something that Jenna Price wrote in the Canberra Times recently, where she said you were the one who should step down really rather than Gillian Triggs. Tim Wilson, who could show some leadership among Conservatives by standing up for what's right rather than what's right, is strangely silent and wonders why you're not standing up for Gillian Triggs and the like. How have you dealt with that?
Well, firstly, I'm completely dismissive of the article. How have I been silent? Yesterday I was on The Drum talking about these issues. Last Friday I was on Sky News talking about these issues. Last Thursday afternoon I was on 3AW Radio in Melbourne talking about these issues. The President is the person who's responsible for this report. She is the chief spokesperson. She has actually asked me not to be a significant contributor because to let her lead that debate. I am simply respecting her wishes.
Has she asked you not to publicly back her?
She has asked me. That's a very crude question, and I know exactly what you're doing. And it's very clear that it's a policy report, and she is the chief spokesperson, and I'm respecting her wishes. But what I want to make clear is that the key focus should be on the children, not on ourselves.
Nor indeed on Gillian Triggs, perhaps, then, following your logic. The key focus should be on the report.
I've always said that.
On the
exactly
content
right.
of the report, not the person releasing it.
We should be focusing on the content of the report and making sure that children are never in detention again.
So do you imagine that the government will revisit the idea of scrapping Section 18C? Is that what you understand the government is looking to do, say, in the next 12 months?
Well, they've already said that they're not going to do that. But
do you think they might change their mind?
Well, I mean, I hope they change their mind, because the reality is, across the world, we're seeing people dying to defend free speech, and yet politicians in our own parliament don't have the fortitude to remove a simple piece of legislation, a particular section of legislation, which would simply make it lawful to offend or insult somebody on the base phrase, a standard which doesn't exist for any other section within the community. And these are some of the issues that I'll be raising in my speech today to make sure that the standard of law treats everybody equally. And
for you, what are the real, leaving that one aside, what are the real pressure points when it comes to human rights in Australian society at the moment for the year ahead?
Well, the real pressure points in the work that I've been going around and talking to people directly about has been in the area of property rights, particularly around housing affordability, access to social housing and support, making sure people who are elderly have access to shelter on long-term leases. Also a lot of issues around religious freedom and the contest and interaction with public policy.
Tim Wilson, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia.
And Tim Wilson, of course, is delivering that address at the Press Club today, and that's always broadcast on ABC TV.